rather than hold, so we don't hear any background noise. That would be great. And at this time, I would ask Mr. Hager to take the roll.
Mr. Downey.
Here.
Ms. Ellis.
Here.
Ms. Joyner.
Here.
Mr. Mazzoni.
Here.
Mr. McCoy.
Here.
Ms. Boothman.
Here.
Vice Chair Lewis indicated she will be absent today. Chair Atkins.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. And before we get to public comment, if possible, I'd love to have this meeting end by 4 o'clock. I do have a commitment that I need to try and get to. So I know there's only one agenda item, but it's a big one. So if we could end at 4, I would be really, really appreciative. Mr. Hager, any other announcements?
No.
With that, we will open up for public comment. If you have public comment, and there's no public comment in the South, I'm not sure what the logistics would be if you need to step up in Carson City.
We have no public comment here.
Okay. Any public comment on the telephone? Doesn't sound like it. With that, we could go to agenda item 3.
And the minutes, we were unable to get them completed in time, so we will provide those at the next meeting, along with the minutes for this meeting.
Thank you very much. With that, let's go to agenda item 4, Mr. Hager.
Agenda item number 4 includes the calendar or timeline of deliverables. You'll see at the bottom half of it, items going to the December 13th board meeting. Talks about the complaint and appeals process, basically the overall general idea of how the complaints appeals process will work. That was approved by the committee at the last meeting. Not on here is will be a recommendation to expand the hours of operation of the call center to include weekends and Sundays. And then the 3 items that are under review are all part of agenda item number 5 for the plan for navigators, enrollment assisters, and producers. And then we'll develop a detailed consumer assistance program and timeline for completion and present that to the board for review and approval, and prepare the consumer assistance evaluation and monitoring program. And we expect those to go to the March 14th meeting. We are going to talk to the board at the meeting on December 13th about whether or not we should do the workshop for the appeals regulations at this committee level or at the board level. If they decide to do it, we will hold a meeting probably in February to do these 2 items here, as well as a possible adoption workshop or a possible regulation workshop for an adoption hearing that would go to an April board meeting. So that's basically what we have going on and where we're at right now. You can see the recommendations. 4 recommendations approved, 7 recommendations that are pending approval, and I should say that recommendation number 7 has not been completely finalized by this committee. With that, I know it's been a painful process going through this over some 5 or 6 committee meetings. We've gone back and forth about various issues in the plan for the navigators, enrollment assisters, and producers. But I think because of the ongoing public dialogue, this has become a better product than it would have been if we rushed through it. So I appreciate the committee's patience in going through this. I realize that we're doing it yet again. But I think the changes that you see here have brought together the various points of view from all of the stakeholders, the committee members, and the board. So I think we're going to end up with a very good product for navigators, enrollment assisters, and producers. With that, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hager, and I completely agree. I know it's been a very long process, but I think it's one that's been necessary. So are there any questions from committee members for Mr. Hager? Ms. Ellis?
I just have a comment under the recommendation on page 11 for item 7. On A, it says navigators are certified by the Division of Insurance, compensated by the exchange through competitive grant process, and will enroll individuals in qualified health plans. I think it should say individuals and small businesses in qualified health plans. That was a decision of this committee last time.
We'll make that change.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, agenda item 4 is closed. Before we get to number 5, I would love a little higher volume. I don't know if that's actually here or if it's in up north. I'd love a little more volume down here, though. And actually, Ms. Ellis has another question into agenda item 4 that I'll reopen.
Sorry, but also on the key delivery timetable, I couldn't match the recommendations with the table, and I know that some of them are brand new and maybe they have not been able to update the table, so I wonder if you can take a second look at that and make sure that the table matches with the list of recommendations.
Which ones are incorrect?
So committee calendar, key deliverables, and timeline, subject to change. For instance, recommendation, if you go down the line to brokers allowed to individual billing, appeals process, that they just don't match those titles. Am I reading these correct? And there
Yeah.
are pending recommendations, but they're not in the list of pending or under review.
So recommendations number 5, 6, and 7 are under the subtitle Committee Recommendations Pending Board Approval. And they are under either pending board approval on the table or under review on the table.
Okay.
It doesn't actually list the recommendation number.
Oh, okay. But they are there. The table includes them all.
Yes, and so if you'll recall, this table in this general format was provided back in March. We didn't do a lot to change it other than, for instance, we added outreach specialists and then changed it to enrollment assisters. But we didn't really change the wording, but the recommendation might be a little bit different. We did add the one about whether or not web brokers participate, but generally the format of this table has been the same other than moving things up and down when we get something approved. But I think it does reflect the recommendations that have been approved or are pending approval.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. It didn't sound like the volume's gotten higher. I'm sorry, maybe it's me. Okay, yeah, we have a few people here that just need a little more volume.
Can we adjust the volume here, or do you have to adjust it?
We did adjust the volume here. It just makes our TV louder.
So I think we can make our TV louder, but I think you need to make your TV louder there.
What?
Just you think like TV.
Okay, can you talk?
Test. Can you hear me? Testing.
Talk more.
Consumer Assistance Advisory Committee, November 29th, 1:39 p.m.
We're on the highest volume.
We're better?
All right, we're on the highest volume, so just thank you. That's the best we can do. We can hear you. It's just not like it's not like real loud, which I'd like. But anyway, okay. So let's go to agenda item 5. Mr. Hager.
So agenda item number 5 is the discussion regarding the plan for navigators, enrollment assisters, and producers in the exchange. The changes include an increase to the enrollment assistance budget, change the role of outreach specialist to include facilitating enrollment, and a subsequent change in name from outreach specialist to enrollment assister, and the creation of an exchange enrollment facilitator certification. The old version of the plan can be found on agenda item number 7B for the October 11th board meeting. The new plan is attachment A for this agenda. Disregard the table of contents. It has all sorts of errors in it. So basically in the background what you'll see is kind of a summary of the process that we've been through. It talks about how navigators are authorized by the ACA, but they cannot be paid for using the establishment grant funding that we've received. And so we were going back and forth, and any increase to the navigator budget results in an increased fee to the carriers, which will in turn result in an increased premium to the consumers. And so at least for this first year and a half till we get to December of 2014, if we can minimize that, that would be helpful to keep the cost of premiums down as we transition into the exchange market. So at the same time that we were wrestling with the Navigator Outreach Specialist funding, across the country, other states such as California, Arkansas, they were creating programs called assisters, either direct benefit assisters or in-person assisters, and pretty much the national standard for that term for a similar function to navigators, but not exactly the same perhaps, is the assister. And the assister can be paid for with establishment grant funds. The concern, of course, though, is if we have two programs that are exactly alike, how do we distinguish it between a navigator and enrollment assister function, and how do we avoid any adverse audit findings for the use of the grant funding? We don't want to end up in a situation where we have to pay back a bunch of money to the feds because we didn't do things properly. So so back in the early summer, we changed the assisters because of confusion to outreach specialists. They were only allowed to provide education and outreach. They were not allowed to enroll individuals. We thought that they would partner with producers that would help things out, but they really couldn't do any enrollment. And obviously that created a lot of concerns with the staff, with the committee, with the board. As we got through this a little bit further and started seeing the assister name pop up more and more and started talking to SESIO about it, they indicated that they could basically be the same thing. We call them different and they have different funding sources. That still makes us uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to simply take the word of a state officer from SESIO without anything in writing. And so we do feel that there needs to be a clear difference between the two groups, and what that difference is difficult to say. What we've put in here for that difference is that enrollment assisters would be required to have errors and omissions insurance. I don't know if that's appropriate or not, and we'll talk about that when we get to it. But we would like to make sure there is some kind of clear difference other than the name. But as we went through this, the board request, you guys had concerns about, the committee had concerns about the budget. The board also had concerns about the budget, kicked it back to the committee, and the result was a report that you saw at the last committee meeting. We have included the budget in this plan so you can see the final numbers, or the semi-final numbers, I should say. The numbers will change as our enrollment projections change, but for now, based on our current enrollment projections, the numbers that you see here in this projection are the correct numbers. They include the enrollment in the shop exchange. So there was a discussion about whether or not navigators and outreach specialists would assist individuals in the shop exchange. The committee recommended that we do in fact include employees and employers enrollment as part of the functions of a navigator outreach specialist. So the budget has been increased to reflect that increase in enrollment assistance required. So that was basically the background to how we ended up here. So the changes that we see in the report that's in attachment A, generally the changes are, we use track changes, so for the most part blue highlighting, although there's one place that has red for some reason, and we will fix that at the final report to the board. Those represent the changes from the previous report that has been approved already by this committee. And then when we look at the section on enrollment assisters, section 6, that, because it's all brand new, instead of showing it all as new, we only showed where there are differences between that program and the Navigator program, so you could clearly see what the differences are between those two programs. But otherwise, that's how the report is laid out. So in the updates, the Exchange Enrollment Facilitator certification, we talked about how we believe that the Division of Insurance is comfortable with the direction that we're taking, as long as individuals who assist in enrollment are certified by the Division of Insurance. So rather than create a separate certification for navigators versus enrollment assisters, the recommendation from the Division of Insurance was to create a single certification, which we have called here tentatively an Exchange Enrollment Facilitator certification. So any individual that's part of a navigator entity or an enrollment assister entity that does enrollment would have to have this certification. And I think that's still within the concept that was approved by this committee previously. That the committee said that the navigators would have to be certified. So this satisfies that function, that requirement from this committee. And so we basically show on page 3 the enrollment facilitator certification applying to both the navigators and the enrollment assisters. You'll notice that the training, while we don't have a lot of changes to it, that training was originally put in the navigator section. We took that out and put it simply in the enrollment facilitator certification section. We have eliminated the hours per topic, the additional topics that might be there, the specifics regarding testing and passing scores. We'll provide that at a later date. We need to go over that with the Division of Insurance. Because the Division of Insurance is creating the certification, we'll need to work with them to make sure that it's appropriate, but it really is ultimately their call on the final certification because it's a consumer protection issue for insurance in the state as a whole. And so as one of the sections of our statute says we can't impede the commissioner's ability to regulate insurance, and part of the consumer protections is that regulation of insurance. So we will provide our input and make sure that the required training is in there, that we need to make sure our navigators are doing the appropriate work and our enrollment assisters, but we'll work through that with the Division of Insurance. We clarified that certain providers may not be navigators, and we had a discussion about whether or not providers could be navigators. At one point we said providers couldn't be because they're paid by insurance entities. Then we took another look at it and we decided that because it's payment in conjunction with enrollment, and providers are not getting paid for enrollment, they're getting paid for providing services as doctors or hospitals, that they could enroll. However, we do think that it's important that that second item on page 5, the second bullet, a subsidiary of a health insurance issuer cannot be a navigator. And so therefore, if a provider organization is owned by an insurance issuer, we don't think that they can be navigators. So we just wanted to be clear on that. I know there was some concern about allowing navigators to be providers, and I do think it's appropriate, but I think that one is very clear. We unfortunately have to exclude certain providers because they might be owned, the provider group might be owned by an insurance company. The next set of changes is the requirement that navigators have individuals with the Exchange Enrollment Facilitator certification. And it's really not any different from what the committee required in the past, that the navigators would be certified. But because we added the facilitator certification, then we've basically said a navigator has to show that they have, that prior to the commencement of the navigator operations, the employees or associated volunteers who have an EEF certification issued by the DOI must be on staff. If the navigator ceases to have a person with an exchange enrollment facilitator certification, then all navigator operations must cease at that point. You have to have somebody certified in order to carry out the functions of a navigator, and one of those functions is facilitating enrollment. Obviously, we've taken out the references to the budget on the navigator section and have included them in section, I believe it's 7. We felt that it is important to show the budget for the navigators and the enrollment assisters together in a comprehensive manner, so that previous report that the committee approved at the last meeting is basically section 8 of this report, adjusted for the various decisions that have been made since then. We clarify on page 7 that ACA funding cannot be used for navigators, and that any increase to the navigator program would be an increase to the per member per month fees. We've added section 6, which is enrollment assisters, or I should say we've adjusted enrollment section 6 to reflect the similarities between enrollment assisters and navigators. but we've shown a few differences. And again, these are up for discussion. We're not sure if they're appropriate or not, but one of the clear ways that we thought we could distinguish between navigators and enrollment assisters would be to require enrollment assisters to have errors and omissions insurance. Again, we're not sure if that's appropriate. What we've determined from one Northern Nevada broker, errors and omissions insurance appears to be about $1 for every 3 enrollments. It's based on premium amounts. If you assume a $300 per month premium per individual, it comes out to about $1 per every 3 enrollment, or 33 cents per enrollment. For the entire insured population, it's about $42,000 or $45,000 per year for errors and omissions if we were to do a blanket policy for all enrollment. Again, not sure if it's appropriate to make that as the distinction, but we've included it there. We can have that discussion in a minute and talk about whether or not we want to get rid of that. The budget obviously was added as we discussed. A couple changes. There is a random fragment of a sentence on page 13 below the table. You can delete that. And the figure 2 should be updated to say recommended budget for navigators and outreach specialists. And then finally, training standards for producers.
John, can you repeat what you just said about figure 2?
You're going about 250 miles an hour faster than we move in Las Vegas.
Oh, come on, you guys move fast in
Can you
Vegas.
repeat the last one you just went through about the dangling participle and stuff?
Yes, so page 13,
Yes.
below the table, there's a fragment sentence. It says, based on the recommended increase to enrollment assistance budget, the changes to the per, delete that fragment. And then above the table, the label for figure 2 should say recommended budget for navigators and enrollment assisters.
Thank you.
The final change to this report is a change in the training for producers on page 15. Again, the certification of producers is a division of insurance function. We will certainly have input into the training that will be required of producers. We do think it's important that they get trained up on the functions of the exchange and how that all works. But setting specific timelines without having had a chance to really take a good look at the specifics of the training was premature. We will certainly use those hours as guidelines, but they may fluctuate half hour, or something like that. So we wanted to take them out. We will be happy to bring the training requirements back to the committee if the committee would like that. And then as far as the testing goes, it's again premature to put in the testing requirements. We do think that there will be testing, but we just don't know exactly what the passing score will be or what that test will be comprised of. Producers will be required to have an agreement with the exchange. The idea is that all producers will be able to enroll individuals in the exchange, but the federal requirement is that they have to have an agreement with the exchange. So if a producer does not execute that agreement, they would not be able to do it. Now, we don't expect it to be a very complicated or difficult thing to sign, but that will be part of it. I think with that, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hager. I'm assuming there's lots of questions. It seems to me, if I could just, I have one question that I wanted to ask first, I guess. It seems to me that the biggest issue is how to differentiate enrollment assisters from navigators. That to me seems like the biggest discussion item today. If anyone disagrees, or if there's a couple other issues that people really want to delve into, that's fine. So it makes perfect sense that we do need to differentiate them for the purposes of using the ACA funds. My question to staff is, when you were thinking about requiring enrollment assisters to have errors and omission coverage, are you also then taking the step that they would be giving advice, or not? Because if not, it doesn't make sense really to have errors and omission coverage. So I'm trying to figure out what the theory is on that, other than just we need something different, which I do understand we need something different.
Well, so if a enrollment assister were allowed to offer advice that would certainly make a distinction. I don't know how far we want to go down that road. While we expect that we will train navigators and enrollment assisters to be able to provide the information on the website, the advice that brokers provide comes with a lot of background and experience, with years worth of experience. And so I'd be interested to hear from the producers on the committee or in the room about whether or not that makes sense. But that certainly provides a much greater distinction between the two. Again, I don't know if that's appropriate or not.
But that is staff's theory, though. The
Yes.
theory is the difference would be that the enrollment assisters would be able to do something that the navigators can't do, which is give advice. Therefore, they would need the E&O coverage.
Yeah, I have to admit we did not take that into account when we made the recommendation, but it does make sense.
Okay, so that was the one thing that stuck out in my mind. So I just wanted to throw that out on the table. So other either comments on that, other questions, and we can kind of start going into this. Ms. Parati-Guzman?
That was the question and or comment I had to, if you will, tag on to what Lynn was saying, is that if there was, as I look through the material, and I know I was catching up a few meetings, what is the one difference between the enrollment assisters and the navigators? It almost looks like they're duplicate roles. And
The one difference right now is the name and the funding. And we would appreciate the committee's input to provide a different distinction.
Well, John, as far as the looking at the table for costs, it's obvious, well, it's not obvious, but implied that the enrollment assisters are going to be paid on a different basis, if you will. It's called a grant, but they're going to be paid differently than a navigation grant, correct?
We have not decided how we would do that.
Okay, well, I just wondered how you came up with the figures, which are so high for the assisters. Other than the fact the feds are going to be paying for it, we'd rather come out of that pot than our exchange pot.
That's how we decided it.
Okay, well, that's what I thought.
So to recap how we did the budget, we originally had a very slim budget for navigators and about an equal budget for outreach assistance. When we went through the budgetary process and determined how many people would use navigators or enrollment assisters, how long they would take, the potential hourly wage that an enrollment assister might have, we came up with a total budget that you see here of $2.7 million for the first year and the $2.2 million for the second year. We allocated the entire increase then to the enrollment assister budget. So that's why there's that major difference. The assumptions behind it are exactly the same as far as on a per enrollee basis. Unless the committee decides that there's we should pay them differently.
Go ahead. No, I just was, and we comment from Las Vegas is similar to mine, and that is, when you balance this out, and we as a committee, or the board, or people associated with the Silver State Health Insurance Exchange process that's been underway, we may understand all this. Let's go out to the marketing aspect of it, to the consumer, and that should be the purpose of our concern here with this committee. There's going to be confusion. Well, what are you? Oh, I'm a navigator. What are you? I'm an enrollment assister. And they're identical, except, so right now, one's carrying yours in admissions insurance. And I think that is a problem.
Yeah, we have I definitely agree with that. I do think, though, we all, Lynn Atkins for the record, it sounds to me, though, and just from our past discussions, the idea behind this is because we need more boots on the ground. We can't use the ACA funding for navigators. So without increasing the cost significantly for the per member cost, we can use ACA fundings for enrollment assisters. So that's why we're doing this. I think we all agree that that is the right thing to do. So we're trying to figure out how to differentiate them, because what we can't do, as John was saying, is you can't just say, voila, a navigator is an enrollment assister and therefore it gets different funding. It has to have a different duty. Something needs to be different between them. So So,
I have a suggestion, actually.
yes, Ms. Joyner?
Well, first, I really don't think that it's appropriate to have this requirement for errors and omissions. I think that it would be a barrier to some of the organizations that, volunteers or some of the nonprofits we'd envisioned. I guess it's not clear to me why they have to be different. In my mind, if people are applying for a grant to be an enrollment assister versus applying for a grant to be a navigator, their names or organizational names will end up in different databases, and their money will come from different places. Is it as simple as saying, when you go to the Division of Insurance, you're going to get an EEF? Can you get an EEFN for navigator and an EEFE for enrollment assistant? And I think the confusion with the public, I would hope that there's no difference between these two groups. I don't really think one of them should be giving advice and the other one not. Hopefully it won't matter to the public. I guess it's not clear to me why they have to do different things or why they have to be distinguished. If it's just an auditing function, then when they apply for the grant, their names will be in different pools. It's not clear to me why they're going to be confused from an audit standpoint.
Mr. Hager, do you want to answer that, or?
I'm going to ask our operations officer and grant expert to answer that.
So I'll start by saying that every time I think about spending $1 from our grant, there are certain things that you think about. You think about whether it is allowable, if this is a funding, activity that the feds have said, yes, this is what you do with this money. If it's allocable, is this something that, maybe somebody is doing more than one thing? If you have different grant funding, is this allocable to that particular grant? So you have to prove that. Sometimes that's through a time study that may, so that you show I spent this amount of my 40-hour week on that particular activity. Therefore, I can charge that much of that person's time to that particular grant. My issue, and I think that purely because I'm signing off on these grant reports to the feds and saying these are the activities that we're providing, when I say that all of these people are doing the exact same thing, but I want this much money from the grant to pay these people, and it's a much, much smaller amount that I'm paying on our own as the exchange, the appearance, not of impropriety, and I'm not going there, I'm just saying that I need to be able to justify the difference. And it could be something as different as metrics or reporting requirements. And you're right, as we do these grants, if say we do our competitive grant process and we have organizations out there who are running our Navigator program and organizations running Outreach Assisters, perhaps there is something very simple, either an hourly wage difference or a metrics or a reporting requirement. Somebody is going to have to do something different than the other. And I'm looking towards the committee to help us figure out what that might be and what might be acceptable to the committee. Because I have to go back to the feds and say, you know what, I'm giving another, I'm asking for, $1.5 million for something that these other people are doing the exact same thing, and you've told us we can't use this money for. Does that help?
It does, thanks.
Okay.
Because you have to justify it to them why you're spending the money on this different group of people.
I do.
What are the other states doing? I thought we got this whole idea because another state was getting away with it.
We did.
What are they doing?
The problem with the other state is it's a state partnership exchange. Arkansas is a state partnership, and the federal government is going to run the Navigator program in the state of Arkansas, and the state of Arkansas is going to run their in-person assistance program.
So it's reversed.
One of the concerns, though, that I have is historically with the Affordable Care Act, focus, and we've had so many discussions on it in committee meetings here, the focus is on navigator, producer. We're required to have navigators. It seems that this approach really minimizes the role of a navigator in the Nevada exchange.
I would feel that
Las Vegas.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. We feel out of the conversation here. Would you guys like to answer that, staff, and then if we can bring it back this way for just a moment?
my point on that is that the navigators, I feel personally that the federal requirement for a navigator is already, I think, has been minimized in the fact that they have said you only have to have 2. They didn't give us a determination of how much involvement there had to be or how many people it had to be. You know, Nevada could have chosen to make it even a smaller group of people or a smaller participation rate in these activities. And this committee has made sure that I think it is a robust group of people, and the participation is going to be, very important to the success of the exchange. So I think it's as important as we make it. And
well, if I was an entity looking at this, I would say there's much more money available to me as an enrollment than the grant block for navigators, so I'm going that route. And all I'm just saying is that so much was made through the ACA process, legislatively, the whole regulatory process. Our organization's involvement was focused on that navigator, that nonprofit, that urban league, that church, that whatever, that's going to work with a group of people that have not had insurance in the past, and they're going to, in theory, care more about getting this process done. So I'm just, maybe I'm hung up on names, but I think the navigator role is one that I'm having problems with, because I think it's going to be a very secondary role.
Ms. Ellis?
To be honest, for the record, I think it's simpler than what we're making it, and I think we've lost track of the reason why we even consider the option of assisters. It's because we need boots in the ground for open enrollment, and then that funding eventually will not be there, and that position eventually will not be there. So we need to look at the role that we have defined so far for assisters versus navigators. And one of the things that I note under that is that why would assisters be providing, since they are temporary, if we may, why would they be providing information or enrollment or assistance in programs that are so complicated, that are permanent, like Medicare and other CHIP programs, where they can very well say, we are part of the exchange for the initial enrollment of hundreds of thousands of people, and if you want additional information or whoever is in front of them that will need those additional agency programs, then they can send them to the navigators.
Ms. Parada-Guzman?
Gina Parada-Guzman, for the record. I have to support that. When I sit and read through bullet 6.2 under roles and responsibilities, for example, of enrollment assisters, who are responsible for outreach, education, and all of a sudden see enrollment. And I agree, it's like, that addresses the fact that they would need to have that insurance coverage for errors and omissions, which is an extra additional expense. At the same time, it doesn't define them differently, and I think what maybe our initial purpose was having this role in the beginning, boots on the ground, out there with cultural diversity, providing education, information, and then yes, again, if they reach a perspective of where a higher resource on what this programming is and what's needed, they refer. I don't know.
Well, and on the same time, I agree with the rest of the committee, adding the advice function to the assisters. I don't think it's appropriate. I don't feel comfortable with that at all. I think we should leave that to the broker community, and just like navigators will eventually need to refer, and it will be a partnership with the brokers community. I think assisters need to engage into the same type of partnership when it's above and beyond their roles and responsibilities that need to go to another partner.
So just following up on that though, then would you agree that then they don't need the errors and omission?
But they will not be providing advice at all.
So what would the difference be then? Removing,
well,
are both of you suggesting?
Roles. Yes, some of those roles. I mean, some of the things that are more permanent and more complex, like some of the state programs. I don't know.
I know Mr. Mazzoni had a question earlier that I kind of blew him off. So Mr. Mazzoni.
This is the story of my life. This is an interesting discussion because I think we've done a hell of a lot of obfuscation for the last several months over the title of producer, navigator, assister, brother, whoever. And I think we need to go back, John, if you will, and CJ, to some discussions we had CJ, you and I, several months ago. We're not doing a very good job of defining, and I think that's what's been said here, of what the real role of a navigator is, what the real role of this quote assister is. And Tom, I totally agree. Change the name. Let's go find someone that has a good name for that. And what actually the role is of the producer. Not fighting against having those things here. I just need to know, what am I going to work with? If I'm going to be a producer in the system, where am I? Who am I accountable to? Who am I liable to? Why do I have to carry E&O when, earlier in discussion, an assister is going to do the same darn thing I'm doing, and maybe or maybe isn't going to carry E&O? And I was really curious, John, by your commentary, who pays for the E&O? Were you implicating that the exchange is going to budget $48,000 to pay for the E&O? If so, I'd like to add my bill for E&O to that. Because why, if you're going to pay for it for the assister, why not pay for it for me, the producer? And I think I would speak for every producer in town. And it's nobody's business right now. You want to look it up, you can figure out what we pay for E&O. Some of us pay a heck of a lot. But I think we've gone way beyond the scheme of things, and we need to draw back, and that's what I think I've heard today anyhow. We need to draw back and look at the navigator, the enrollment assister, and even the producer, and redefine more distinctly and succinctly what those positions are and how they operate. Because right now, I can't figure out where we are with this thing, quite honestly, and I've got notes all over the place between navigator and EEFs and enrollment assisters and everything else. So I would respectfully suggest we take a step back, let's look at this thing, and let's take these pages like 9 of 18 and so forth, and some of this stuff, and figure out exactly on this list what is important and what are the requirements. And I would look to John, you, and CJ. What's the requirements within ACA for this versus what do you interpret, or what do the attorneys interpret, the AG's office interpret the role under state law that was passed 2 years ago, well, almost 2 years ago.
Okay, I'm gonna have, Mr. Downey has a question or a comment, and yes, I think I think Ms. Ellis has a question or comment, and then Ms. Joyner and Mr. McCoy have comments. I'd like to get the comments, and then yes, we need to start going through these. But I do believe that navigator definition is from the Affordable Care Act, and I believe the producer definition is the producer definition. So I think we kind of got to get back to how we're going to define the enrollment assister. So I don't want to get sidetracked by relooking at all the things that are kind of already settled.
And I'm okay with that.
Okay.
That's exactly what I think we need.
Okay, Mr. Downey.
Thank you. Randall Downey for the record, and I may be slow, but it appeared to me, if memory serves me correctly, the initial distinction between navigators and assisters, their name has evolved over time, was that the assisters would be doing the public outreach and education. Navigators would not function in that role. That is the major distinction, and I think that's the critical distinction. We also decided at a later date that the assisters should be allowed, for geographic and cultural reasons, should be allowed to assist with enrollment. So that position expanded somewhat. The critical difference remains, in my mind, that enrollment assisters are doing the public outreach and education. Navigators do not fulfill that function. They take people or employers as they come to them and help them with enrollment. I think that's the major function and the difference between the two. I would argue that requiring errors and omissions insurance for enrollment assisters without also requiring it, and brokers carry that as well, without requiring it for navigators, I fail to see the rationale for that. I don't think that's the critical difference. The critical difference was in the original setup of the program and the split between the two functions. Enrollment assisters do public education and outreach. They will also be allowed to help with enrollment. Navigators concentrate on SHOP and individual enrollment. That leaves a couple questions not to be decided. That's how I see it.
All right, Ms. Ellis?
I'm sure the staff will answer to that, but in the role of responsibilities of the navigators is also education and community activities to educate and inform the public. So, and that goes back to the ACA, that's hard written, so they do fulfill those both roles. Currently, I think the challenge that we are being tasked with is that there are no difference between the two right now, and I think that I will suggest to go back to, and my question to the staff is there a real need, and how much of an activity do you foresee the assisters doing for programs like Medicaid, CHIP, Medicare, and other programs? Because if assisters were created and the need is for enrollment in the exchange, therefore, why are we expanding the role to also provide eligibility information and assistance on other state programs?
For the record, John Hager. So before I answer that, I'd like to turn the committee's attention to page 2, which outlines that provides the requirements of the Navigator program. The requirements, the ACA requires the exchange to establish a Navigator program to conduct public education activities to raise awareness of the availability of qualified health plans, distribute fair and impartial information concerning enrollment in qualified health plans and the availability of premium tax credits and cost-sharing reductions, facilitate enrollment in qualified health plans, provide referrals to any applicable Office of Health Insurance Consumer Assistance, Health Insurance Ombudsman, or any other appropriate state agency for any enrollee with a grievance, complaint, or question regarding their health plan coverage or a determination under such plan or coverage, and provide information in a manner that is culturally and linguistically appropriate to the needs of the population being served by the exchange. So just to bring everybody back to, that is what is required of the Navigator program by the ACA. Those are the core functions that we have to fulfill. If you'll recall, when we had the issues about the funding, we took away the enrollment function from the, at that point, outreach specialists, enrollment assisters, whatever you want to call them now. And at that point, it became an issue of funding. So we then, last time, talked about the budget and expanding the role of the enrollment sister to include enrollment. The list on page 9, section 6.2, is the same as the list on page 5 and 6 of section 5.2, roles and responsibilities. If we could change that in any way, that would probably provide us the delineation that we need to be able to pay them differently. So the other part of that was the Medicaid assistance. Enrolling in Medicaid is a function of the BOSS web portal, the Business Operations Solution web portal. You go in there, you go to a navigator, and you think you're eligible for a qualified health plan because your income's, I don't know, $20,000, and you go through the process, and lo and behold, I'm eligible for Medicaid. The system will help you determine that you're eligible for Medicaid. It will say that we are transmitting the information to Medicaid. It might take a few days for us to figure out whether or not you are in fact eligible for Medicaid, and we'll get back to you. The idea of the navigator was that they would be able to help an individual that was in that area of income that is questionable. And so you come in, you're Medicaid eligible. You know what? I can't provide you all the answers to Medicaid. I can refer you to Medicaid and to welfare to provide you the answers. We have a basic understanding of what it is. It's an insurance product, basically a health insurance product. But we don't think that our navigators should be providing too much in the way of details for the Medicaid and welfare program. They will provide certainly some information, but they need to refer them. Yeah, and so part of that is to comply with the no wrong door approach and making sure that everybody has access to health care through the same places. So while the enrollment assister is meant to increase the boots on the ground to expand our enrollment of the exchange, there's going to be a lot of overlap in the populations that are served by both the navigators and the enrollment assisters. So I'm not sure if it makes sense to take away that function altogether, but that could certainly be a determining difference between the two.
Ms. Prady-Buston?
Gina Prady-Buston for the record. Just a couple of comments. Mr. Hager, I would respectfully submit that under the Navigator 5.0 section that defines the roles and responsibilities, there is a bullet statement, cultural diversity, that unless I need glasses, is not under the enrollment assisters' roles and responsibilities. So I would think we would need to add that one here. Yeah, the other comment I'd like to just throw out there for consideration is we're looking, understanding the significance and importance, obviously, of both of these roles, considering the ACA requirements, looking at the budgetary considerations, and finding an element within both of these defined roles that will show a difference, that there is a difference. When I consider all of these roles, responsibilities, I'm of the opinion that they're all very important and significant. But one stands out to me that we may want to consider in a difference, that a navigator would oversee of a greater level or greater skill set than would the enrollment assister, and that has to do with dispute resolution. When I consider appeals and denials and the dispute resolution process and what goes into that, it can be an arduous journey, and it can involve a bit higher skill set, if you will, for want of a better term, than providing rules to purchase a subsidized insurance. So as we're looking at this, that might be an option to say, okay, under the dispute resolution, which when I'm thinking correctly, has to do with appeals and denials, maybe a greater role in the appeals and denial dispute resolution would go to the navigators versus the assisters.
Mr. Mazzoni?
Yes and no. Sorry, Dwight Mazzoni. I think we're getting hung up on some stuff here that is really moot if we go back to ACA and to what ACA says a navigator is supposed to do. And if as Gina just pointed out, there are some discrepancies in the documents we have, and that's merely typographical. People make mistakes. Why would we charge? I guess I would ask, in keeping with what you just said, why would we charge an assister with knowing so much about dispute resolution rather than just giving them a list of, if you've got a Medicaid problem, you go to Medicaid. That's what everybody does. Nobody provides any assistance because nobody in this state outside of someone who works for Medicaid or somebody who works in a hospital, you have a person that does just that. All they do is work on Medicaid. I believe we're trying to challenge or build something that really can't exist effectively. And on top of that, if you were to pay them, this would be a $120,000 a year job. I don't think an assister's going to get that, John. Do you? I really don't.
Can I just interrupt just one moment? Because I think this just says aiding consumers to find avenues to resolve. This does not, in my mind, suggest that they are going to be involved in the dispute resolution. It's really someone. Am I?
Page 9 of 18,
yes.
6.2, 1, 2, 3,
yes.
4,
Am I reading
bullet,
that incorrectly?
fifth bullet down.
Aid the consumer to find avenues, such as directing them.
But the discussion I'm hearing, if you will, is that we want someone to take the hand and walk. That's the discussion I feel I'm getting from people. That's what I'm hearing.
Okay.
That's that right.
Yeah, Lynette, for the record, I don't read it that way. Mr. Hager, is that what is intended in that bullet point, is to actually walk them through the process or direct them to the appropriate avenue?
Yeah, I think it was to provide them with the phone number or the address of somebody to go to. But
so Lynette, for the record, I have a horrible idea, which I know everyone's going to hate, but I'm going to suggest it anyway because that's what I like to do. So if we've got our definition, and it is what it is. They're the brokers. We're not changing anything. We have the navigator's definition from the Affordable Care Act. Is there a way to split this enrollment assisters to outreach and education and just enrollment? So you have two, you just kind of break this down. So it's different from navigators. A navigator can do outreach, education, and enrollment. And then there's two kind of subcategories where folks would just be able to do enrollment and folks would just be able to do outreach and enrollment. And then it's three really different things.
For the record, John Hagers.
Mr. McCoy is going, another category! What are you talking about?
No, for the record, John Hagers. So I think actually that would be a very good distinction. We have a separate marketing and advertising budget that includes a lot of the outreach and education. The navigators include that in their function. We could simply limit the role of enrollment assisters to enrollment.
Mm-hmm.
Say that again, John.
That enrollment assisters would enroll people. That is their function. So the very first line under 6.2. So section 6.2, page 9 of 18. Change that to read, enrollment assisters will be responsible for enrollment of the currently uninsured or underinsured. Strike out outreach and education.
Hang on, we're on
Page 9,
6.2, page 9.
6.2, the first paragraph.
We can update the bullets appropriately
Mm-hmm.
to match the goals of the committee for that function, but that would achieve the requirements that we expand the assistance budget to allow the appropriate resources without extending or increasing the per member per month fee. It's specifically focused on enrollment. We have some $5 million set aside in our budget for marketing and advertising, which includes outreach and education. So I think that would do it for us.
Ms. Ellis?
I have a question, as if it's not complicated enough. Under enrollment, as we made a decision last time, navigators will be enrolling employers. Not that I'm suggesting to add that to the assisters, but that also brings a difference between assisters and navigators. Navigators will be able to enroll individuals and employers, assisters won't, just individuals. Just up there.
Mr. McCoy or Ms. Joyner, do you have any comments or thoughts? And if not, that's fine right now. Just want to make sure.
Well, I like
I'm
John's suggestion.
Yeah, for me, the latter part of this discussion, I'm in favor of. I was worried about the former part of the discussion where we were talking about the assisters possibly not being able to enroll, because I think that defeats the point. We need for those first 2 years, which is all this funding is good for anyway, to have them actually walking people through the process. So I'm happy with that most recent recommendation, actually.
Oh my gosh, really? Meeting adjourned. Okay. Okay. So, is there more discussion, or is there a motion on the table to delete outreach and education from the role and responsibilities of enrollment assisters and ask staff to update the bullet points accordingly?
I would make such a motion, but I'm concerned. No offense, CJ or John. I would want the committee to have a big hand in the update of the bullet points. So the motion would be to accept the deletion as indicated by Mr. Hager with an adjustment of the bullet points. But I think this committee, I don't know, are we allowed to do work off of a committee meeting by email and then bring it back to the table for public presentation?
But we have an hour and a half left to do it.
We have an hour and a half. We can go through the bullet points right now, and I prefer to do that because I think we want to try and get this on the December 13th board meeting. Is that right?
That is correct.
I'm seeing lots of nods.
So I'd make a motion that we.
Well, why don't we can not make a motion at the moment?
Well, I thought you wanted.
No, I did, but I did. I have changed my mind.
Oh my God.
No, if we want to update the bullet points, if we can go through the bullet points, if we can do the bullet points and then have a motion, a clean motion on what it entails. Mr. Hager and Mr. Bowden, do you guys want to take a break and chat about it and propose something, or do you want to, for the two of you, not the committee, or do we want to just do this now verbally, and if so, Mr. Hager, can lead the discussion? Which do you prefer?
Yeah, why don't we go ahead and take 5 minutes? But before we do, Madam Chair, if I could get a clarification. So the committee is going to reject the requirement for errors and omissions insurance. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Okay, 5 minutes. It's 2:30. 5 minute break. 10-minute break. What do you prefer?
How about back at 20 till 2:40?
10-minute break. Great. Thank you. Is there a way to turn off the microphones during the break? All right. With that, we are like to get back on the record. We're continuing on agenda item 5. Mr. Hager or Mr. Bowden, could I ask one of you to take the lead on redoing 6.2?
Absolutely. For the record, C.J. Bowden. I'd like to start at 6.2, page 9 of 18, on the roles and responsibilities of enrollment assisters. What staff has come up with is the following verbiage. Enrollment assisters will be responsible for enrollment, strike outreach, education, and from the paragraph, for the currently uninsured or underinsured populations, and will present to those populations the options available under the ACA. This strike outreach and education, insert enrollment assisters, so it would read the enrollment assisters, will provide information regarding the ACA as it relates to the strike exchange, and insert health insurance options for Nevadans.
What was the last word?
Health insurance options for Nevadans.
So read it all one more time through.
So a clear read through of the first paragraph. Enrollment assisters will be responsible for the enrollment of the currently uninsured or underinsured populations, and will present to those populations the options available under the ACA. The enrollment assisters will provide information regarding the ACA as it relates to the health insurance options for Nevadans, including but not limited to.
Okay, I think we're on track with you.
Okay.
Please, thank you.
In the bullet points, bullet point 1 would remain unchanged.
Okay.
Go ahead and read the program.
Program eligibility remains unchanged. Bullet point number 2, methods of purchase, remains unchanged. Bullet point number 3, reasons to purchase, is stricken from the document. Bullet point number 4, definitions of health insurance terms would remain unchanged. Bullet point number 5, dispute resolution. Staff recommends it remains unchanged, but the wording can be changed. Bullet point number 6, access to enrollment localities, remains unchanged. Bullet point number 7, answers to enrollment questions, remains unchanged. Bullet point number 8, group outreach opportunities, is stricken from the document. Bullet point number 9, explain eligibility criteria, remains unchanged. Bullet point number 10, provide documentation, remains unchanged. Bullet point number 11, furnish unbiased explanations of coverage provided on the web portal, remain unchanged. And we would have an addition, bullet point number 12. Oh, excuse me. Bullet point number 12 is explanation of expanded or changed coverage as a result of the ACA. Are you sure that's education, though?
That should stay.
Well, we were thinking it.
No?
We missed it during the break.
We missed it during the break. It was on the back page. This one would be open for discussion. And lastly, the recommendation of the addition of an additional bullet point, which would read, cultural and linguistically appropriate health insurance enrollment assistance.
So for that last bullet point, it was the cultural diversity bullet point that was omitted, so we'd read it as providing culturally and linguistically appropriate health insurance enrollment assistance to Hispanics, Asians, Native Americans, those with disabilities, and other groups.
Okay, so this is Lynn. So basically, the first paragraph was changed for CJ's discretion or description, which I can restate in a moment. But bullet points 3 and 8 are being removed, and bullet point 13 is being added. Is that a clear summary?
Yes.
And 12 was going to be open for discussion, right?
And bullet point 12 was open for discussion.
And 12, is there any discussion on item 12? Who would like to comment on item 12, which is on the second page, on page 10, which says explanation of expanded coverage as a result of the ACA, including insurance rescission rules, lifetime limit changes, preventative screening changes, the 80-20 rule, etc. Mr. Mazzoni?
Dwight Mazzoni for the record. John, you want to explain that one to me?
For the record, John Hager. So, I think that appears to be an educational outreach component to help people better understand the differences between the current market and the new exchange market. I think this really is an outreach and education function more than a sit down with somebody and help them enroll in coverage right then. That's not to say that an enrollment assistant may not they would probably understand some of these things, so that when they're asked questions, well, my insurance is this way now, I was denied this, or my coverage was rescinded, well, you don't have to worry about that now, that kind of thing. But this appears to be more of an educational component, which I think we should probably strike.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any comments about that on the committee? Okay, and it's not on there. Okay. Okay, so with that, then, it would be the amended paragraph, bullet points 3, 8, and 12 being stricken, and bullet point 13 regarding culturally appropriate information would be added.
Well, it'll be 13, though, if you're striking 12.
Correct.
Well, right, but just for all the numbers will change, but just for purposes of the motion. Prior to a motion, are there any other final comments? Mr. Gianni?
Question 5. Mr. Cole, you indicated you might want to change the language on bullet point 5, the street resolution.
If it was the committee's pleasure, yes.
The reason that we brought that up was because of the previous discussion. We think that this is simply providing avenues to find help. For instance, finding the phone number or the address or where to write. It was not intended to say that they would hold their hand through the entire dispute resolution process.
Didn't we talk about some material that would be made available dealing with these options that they would have? And if
Yes.
so, then that would be an opportunity, be you enrollment assistant or whatever, to pass that out and say, here.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, Mr. Mazzoni, a comment, a follow-up comment on that one?
I think it could be easily rectified by just getting word of getting rid of the word aiding. To me, that means I'm going to hold their hand, take them through it. Providing information might fit better or something to that extent, CJ.
Directing the consumer.
This is Lynn. I think that's a great suggestion. So just say providing information to find avenues to resolve disputes, or you can clear up the grammar. But I think that's a great suggestion personally. I'm getting a lot of nods here in Vegas. Nods there in Hammer?
Another question.
Okay, Mr. Mazzoni has another question.
Next bullet down, question, because I'm not sure, I'm just not sure what this is all about. Are we, it would indicate that we should have or will have or do have enrollment localities that are going to be brick and mortar, or are they going to be the library, maybe the sheriff's office, or whatever in whatever town around, you know, or a church or something? And who's paying? Who's paying for this? These services, the fax machine, the computer, the web portal. I'm assuming the call center is Xerox. I don't know, John. You want to help me out here?
So yes, the call center is Xerox. That is not considered a brick and mortar location for the purposes of going someplace to enroll. You will be able to send your enrollment packages into Xerox, but it's not a place to go enroll. There was a discussion, actually I think it was during the negotiations with Xerox and the extra cost for the brick and mortar locations. And I think perhaps it was a discussion with this committee earlier on that we wouldn't provide brick and mortar positions or brick and mortar locations, but that the navigators and the producers have locations or may have locations that they can use. So the idea behind this one, access to enrollment localities, the navigator or the enrollment assister may or may not have a location in which they can give access to an individual to enroll. So for instance, the Urban League has brick and mortar locations all over Las Vegas. They probably have computers in the lobby to be for individuals to use. They would be able to provide their computers to allow people to enroll in exchange coverage. It could be a church that has a computer available. The computers or the resources may or may not be paid for by the exchange. That depends on the grants that are submitted by the navigators or the enrollment assisters, and we would judge those in a grant committee. Is that what they're called? Something like that, and figure out what the best mix of entities would be to assist Nevadans. That would not only be limited. That evaluation would not only include access to brick and mortar locations, and you might have some entities that won't have it, and that's okay because another provider or another entity in that community has it. But it would also be managing the mix of bilingual assisters. You may not need as many bilingual assisters in certain areas, and you might need more in other areas. So we're going to try and make sure that we manage that through the grant review process.
So how about if we just clear that up a little? Here's a suggestion for me, and take out the access to enrollment localities and start with provide enrollment access at locations or mobile computing centers and leave the rest the same. I think the idea is that the enrollment assisters need to be available at all of these areas. Is that right? Or that, or will be according to whatever their grant suggests that they are. But that the idea is that we're trying to make enrollment accessible, and I just think some of the language might be a little bit more cleaned up. So I would say provide enrollment access at locations and leave the rest.
I'd like to add to that if I might. Mike Mazzoni, for the record, based upon what you just said, John, I don't see a need to have call center there because Xerox, you just said we really don't have access to the call center. In my mind. Is that right or wrong?
For the record, John Hager. So when we're providing access to various, I guess it depends on how we look at it. The call center was put in there. They might provide a telephone to be able to call the call center.
Yeah, I would leave it. I think it just makes it broader, and I think also Ms. Ellis has a comment on the call center issue.
I would like to get call center out there because I don't see anybody, me or a navigator, going to call center to doing anything, even if they provided a phone number. The second part of my issue is, and I don't have a problem with web portal or fax line, but and maybe even printing, but mail hard copies of enrollment documents to the Exchange Processing Center. I'm not sure how would you provide that unless you're gonna provide envelopes, postage, etc. I just think, are you driving it too deep? Or do we need it that deep because it's a state? I don't know.
This is Lynn. We decided at the very beginning, and I think the Affordable Care Act requires that we enroll people on a variety of methods. One of them is going to be mail availability. I think we don't want it. Our preference is everyone goes through the web portal, whether it's being assisted by a broker, by a sister, or by a navigator. That's the preference, but we have to make that available. Is that right, Mr. Hager?
That's correct.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. I like to leave the web portal, the call center, and all the options, because the way I'm reading this, any assister or navigator, including producers, will be able to have a person in front of them to provide enrollment. If the computer goes down, they're going to have to pick up the phone and do it over the phone with the call center. And if they need to fax the next day, they're going to have to fax it to the exchange processing sector, which is the call center in return. So I think all these options are appropriate, and we don't know what kind of challenges some of the producers, navigators, and enrollers will have, especially in the rural areas or the small nonprofits out there. So I think it's appropriate to leave.
Madam Chair.
Any other? Yes?
So one of the reasons why we wrote it the way the original language is because a navigator or enrollment assister may not actually be part of an organization that has a brick and mortar location, but they might be able to refer somebody to the local library or to an urban league or to a location that has those facilities. So that was part of why we were providing access to locations that they would be able to leverage the resources of the community, whether it's their resources or somebody else's resources.
That's fine. I'm fine with leaving it then. Final, Ms. Joyner, Mr. McCoy, we have one more question down here. I don't want to, again, ignore the two of you. No. Ms. Prada-Guzman?
Thank you. Gina Prada-Guzman for the record. Quick question. Are these enrollment assisters providing enrollment resources to locations, or are they actually providing access to the locations? Sorry for the red
Could be either way. If we have
You messed up.
What's the definition of access? Is that a verb or is it a?
This bullet is meant to be broad to. I really can't add anything else to that. It's we want them to be able to assist individuals find the proper resources to be able to enroll.
Mm-hmm.
I would suggest resource then be maybe included in the language there.
Enrollment resources?
Yes. Yes. Just, truly opening it.
So maybe it should read provide enrollment resources and access. As a suggestion.
We'll change locations to resources. That makes sense.
Any other comments from committee members? Ms. Ellis?
That's not how I'm reading it, though. I'm putting myself in the shoe of a community organization who will eventually apply to become a navigator and even an assister, and will have their own location, brick and mortar, and then we'll have deploy employees to other places to provide enrollment as well, not in a brick and mortar with a mobile computer as is described here. So in the case of these enroller organizations, it says here, provide access to locations. They may or may not have locations. Provide mobile computer, okay? They may or may not have employees with mobile computers. And facilitate the access to the exchange web portal, whether it is through them or through other community partners, like it was mentioned, any of the chambers or churches. And also provide access to the call center, information about the call center. In fact, that's how I'm reading it. I mean, we're asking the enrollment assisters to provide any of all of these methods in order to enroll. Am I reading this right?
I think so. So perhaps an altered wording. Resources or access to resources. Provide access to locations, mobile computer centers, or other resources that will facilitate access to the exchange's web portal, call center, or fax line, or provide the ability to print and mail hard copies of enrollment documents to the exchange processing center. Does that?
A clarification.
Yeah, that's fine.
Mr. Mazzoni?
Dwight Mazzoni for the record. Timmy, what I heard you say is that bullet, the dispute resolution bullet.
No.
I'm sorry.
Number
Excuse
6.
me. The next one. Excuse me. So many people. Access to enrollment facility. That the way you're reading it is the responsibility of the assister to provide these things.
That as well as the other 13
Yeah.
points. Yeah.
And that's really not what we're asking the assisters to provide. The exchange is going to provide bullet point 6.
No.
Or the navigator group or the community center. It's not going to come on the back of the assister.
I think it's going to depend what the grant says for these particular organizations. They are going to be submitting a grant based upon these guidelines. The organizations are going to be saying, here's what we think we can do for this dollar amount. Staff and the grant managers are going to review all of those. And I'm not sure the final process, whether it goes to the board or whether staff is just going to be awarding the grants. But I think this is a guideline, and the very much weeds that we're all talking about now, I think, are really in the weeds a little bit too much personally. So I think the spirit of this is understandable for the grant applications. Ms. Ellis?
I understand your question, where it's coming from. You are, if I may, making the assumption that assisters are individuals.
No, it can be anybody. It can be anything.
It could be an organization.
Yes.
Okay. So if I follow your thread of thought, say that an assister could be an organization whose employers are also licensed. So that organization may or may not have a facility, may or may not have those employees who will be licensed under assisters. Think of a clinic who may have nurse aides, RNs, doctors, and any other role in the medical facility licensed at a different level, but that facility also has to be licensed. That's how I'm reading this. Or an assister who is independently licensed, if it qualifies when the definitions of those grants come out, who may not agree, may have a location, may have a portable computer, and he may partner with churches or libraries or community centers.
I go back, Dwight Mazzoni for the record, I go back to what...
Does that answer your question?
A little. I go back to what we were talking about before. We haven't yet really defined what an assister is. Is a sister a person? Is it a thing? Is it an entity? If I'm going to be an assister, what am I? And this says some of the things I need to do, or have to do, or should do, but it really doesn't define. When you tell me what a producer is, I can tell you what a producer is. I can't yet tell you what a navigator or an assister is in that way of defining words. I agree with you, but I could take it a step further and say, okay, I'm little old Joe Blow assister out here. Hell, I can't do any of that. Can I be an assister?
Mr. Hager, Mr. Bowden, can you shed a little more clarification on who's going to be submitting the grants for the group?
So
we're going to ask you to submit the grants?
If you could look at page 8 on section 6.1. Section 6.1, and there has to be a minor change to it. I'll read it as I would change it. Enrollment assisters will consist of individuals, public entities, and private entities that will enroll consumers in qualified health plans and publicly funded health care through the multiple enrollment methods provided by the exchange. Navigators, enrollment assisters, and producers will work in concert to ensure all individuals have access to health insurance coverage provided as a result of the Affordable Care Act.
Ms. Crowley-Goodman?
Chief Crowley Goodman for the record. Mr. Hager, just some clarification for me. When I look at 6.2, the title is Roles and Responsibilities of Enrollment Assisters. So when I read the bulleted points, that's how I'm reading. These are roles and responsibilities of whatever entity, person, individual becomes through their grant approval and enrollment assister. So when I read, for example, back to the enrollment assister will provide access, to locations. Again, I envision in my head, are they providing access, meaning they're providing the physical locality, they're providing transportation? Again, is that, and you did say earlier it's a broad, general statement. So again, are they providing resources, or are they providing the actual physical locality and whatever that would entail?
For the record, John Hager, it depends. It depends on the enrollment assister and their grant application and what they have provided. So we envision that they would provide either locations or mobile computing centers or other resources that would allow an individual, would facilitate access to the exchange's web portal, call center, or fax line, or provide the ability to print and mail hard copies of enrollment documents to the exchange processing center. The exchange will not be providing a brick and mortar location, and so we hope that we will find several, if not more, enrollment assister and navigator entities that will have brick and mortar locations. On the other hand, a brick and mortar location may not do a whole lot of good to the frontier areas of Nevada where it might make more sense to have a mobile computing center. An entity that has a brick and mortar location may not have a mobile computing center, but another organization might. The other side of that is you might have individuals that reach out in a different manner, and we don't want to limit our possibilities. We don't want to keep everybody in a box. We want people to think outside the box in the grant applications, and so we want to be able to take advantage of that without limiting them to a specific thing, and that's why we said that this is a broad requirement. But the idea is that they're providing access mostly to resources, whether that's a brick and mortar location, a mobile facility, a computer. They brought to a grocery store or to a hospital a paper application. It's providing the resources necessary to help people enroll.
Thank you, Mr. Hager. And I'm of the opinion that that should stay just as you said in the beginning.
Okay. With that, I want to go ahead and make a motion on 6.2 because that's the one obviously that's had a lot of changes, and then we need to go through and make sure we go through and hopefully accept the changes that are in the other parts of the document so staff can prepare this for the board meeting on the 13th. So with that, is there a motion to accept 6.2 as amended, deleted, and added without having someone read the entire thing again per staff and that we've just reviewed? Mr. Downey makes the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Pratty-Boothman, second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, everyone. That was a good discussion. Should we, I think, Mr. Hager, do you want to should we just start, should we just do it a section at a time, or should we just address the ones that people might have questions on? What is your preference?
For the record, John Hager, so the elimination of the errors and omissions insurance was pretty clear. We've from the discussion. Actually, let me back up. I think I can go through the changes that are in this document from the previous document, and I think that they can be incorporated into a single motion. We can stop, and I can ask for questions after each change I discuss, if that's appropriate, and but then I think there are not enough. I don't think there's enough controversy to go for a separate motion for each, unless we have.
That sounds fine.
Okay.
That sounds fine.
So the changes are included in the report, the original report. So the exchange enrollment facilitator certification is added to page section 4, page 3. And so that certification and training, are there any questions on that?
I have a question on, I'm assuming.
Mr. McCoy, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr. McCoy.
Oh, I'm sorry. We've discussed this training before, and I'm assuming the protocol on this will be in-person training, not online. So in terms of locations in the state, are we thinking in terms of having opportunities for people who want to be assisters or navigators to be in Elko as well as a Carson City or Reno and Las Vegas and that sort of thing? Has that been discussed, I guess?
Internally.
Yes, internally with the Division of Insurance. The Division of Insurance provides facilities for training. Do you know much
They
more
have
about
an
it?
outside vendor. Sorry, for the record, Shauna DeRose. The Division of Insurance has an outside vendor that has facilities both north and south where people who wish to go through testing and education can go through. Our understanding is that part of their building this curriculum, then they would provide this training through those facilities. It would be in person, I believe, but actually, I'm not going to say that. I don't know if it's in person
well, nowhere
or online.
in the document does it say in person, online.
You're right. You're right, and I don't know that they've gotten to that level of detail. I do know that they have said there will be a test with a required passing score, just like other producer testing that is out there. And then the internal discussions that we would have is that once a person has gone through that certification and received a passing score, then they could go through specific exchange training in person at our facilities, and that would include Carson City, Las Vegas, Elko, Winnemucca. We would
Yeah,
make
but they
that
would have
statewide.
to physically come.
We're going to go out to
You're going to go out.
the rural
Okay.
communities
I'm just looking at the cost factor for some of the nonprofits, et cetera. If they've got
to
to
have to travel.
haul in from Elko to go to a Reno training session, it may be
Yeah, so there is, the Division of Insurance will certify somebody as an exchange enrollment facilitator in these types of things. So basically, you need to understand health insurance. You need to understand some basics of Medicaid, et cetera. There will also be a web portal training function that you have to understand where to find information in the web portal. That will have to be provided not only to navigators and enrollment assisters through after they get the exchange enrollment facilitator certification, but will also have to be provided to producers
Sure.
so they understand where to get the information from. It might be slightly different for producers because producers have much more knowledge of the current insurance market, and that can be transferred to the new market. But the requirements for the training and the certification, as has been stated, it's similar to the licensing for the producer, but it is not necessarily as strenuous. It's not a life and health. It's just health. Actually, I guess I can't add anything else to that.
Yeah, we don't have any more details yet.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Ms. Ellis?
I have a question. It should, the last sentence on the change says that there will be a required statutory change to the current statute. Will that affect the timeline of implementation and affect the time where we can have assisters and navigators out in the community enrollment? Because the session doesn't end until somewhere in June, where everything is signed. We won't even know by July. Open enrollment is in October. Do we even have time to have these people in the field?
Yes. The latest that this bill would be passed would probably be June 4th, which is the last day of session. We did not envision having navigators online until at least July 1st because we can't pay for navigators prior to July 1st because it requires operational funds. We're not even going to get those funds until January, but we can take a loan out from the State General Fund to pay for them at the first half of the fiscal year and pay for them through the funds we get during the rest of the year. We had envisioned starting the enrollment assisters at about the same time. We don't need the statutory authority to certify an entity prior to creating the program. The Division of Insurance will need to be able to have that authority, but we can start that program and start that implementation process before the bill is actually passed. Hopefully we can get the bill passed earlier than that, but as you know, most bills wait till the last second. But yeah, so we would get the authority. The training program would theoretically be already set up. The certifications would start in June and July. We can phase in the program. Keep in mind that the enrollment assister is doing enrollment, so their functions really shouldn't start earlier than October 1st anyways. They might start gathering data for individuals and start reaching out to start pinging them to enroll a little bit earlier, but they really can't do their job as we've changed it today until October 1st. With the navigators, obviously that outreach and education component can start earlier, and as I've said earlier, the marketing and outreach or advertising budget is $5 million set aside separately from this program. So there is the ability we're going to have quite a robust marketing and advertising campaign that will phase into the use of the navigators and the enrollment assisters.
All right, thank you. If no other comments, if you would please proceed with.
We clarified that certain providers cannot be navigators. That was provided on page 5.
Ms. Ellis has a question.
They can now be navigators, however, can they be assisters? Providers.
I think that same amendment was in the assistant, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's the same language.
I thought I saw it, but maybe not.
So it was included. It's the second bullet on the top of page 9. Last sentence. We didn't differentiate between the two.
Okay.
Ms. Ellis, did you want to make any other comment on that? No. Okay. Okay. Any other comments on page 5? Okay, Mr. Hager.
On page 6, 5.3, we added the requirement that the application includes that the navigator can show that they have or will have, prior to the commencement of navigator operations, employees or associated volunteers who have an exchange enrollment facilitator certification issued by the DOI. If the navigator ceases to have an EEF certified individual on staff, all navigator operations must cease. And I would say that with that, of course, the funding would cease as well. That is analogous to page 6.3. The third bullet on 6.3, it's the same requirement for enrollment assisters that they have an EEF certified individual on staff. And that's even more.
You had a question? I'm sorry, Mr. Down had a question about that. I thought you were done speaking. I apologize.
And so that's definitely going to be a requirement for the enrollment assisters since their function has been limited to enrollment. Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. The final underlying passage is, how will this or will it apply to call center staff? Will they be, have there been discussions with Xerox concerning changes to or augmentations, amendments to the contract that call center staff fielding phone calls will be certified under these conditions?
There has been discussions with Xerox. Yes, we're working on that.
Okay. Next item, Mr. Hager.
We clarified the navigator and enrollment assister funding sources on page 7 and page 10. It's simply saying that the navigator could not be funded through ACA grant funding. We added a requirement that enrollment assisters be covered under errors and omissions insurance, and I think we've said that we're going to delete that requirement. We added the budget for navigators and enrollment assisters that was approved by the committee at the last committee meeting, and then we have removed some of the specificity on the training of the producers, and that's on page 15 and 16.
And in light of, just Lynn Atkins for the record, in light of the changes we made to enrollment assisters, if there's any language, and I'm just going to ask, we do not need to go through this as a group, but I would ask staff just to review 6.0 and 6.1, and if there's any language that needs to be cleaned up or deleted to correlate with the changes we made, I'd ask staff to do that.
We will do that.
All right, so any other comments or questions about the other changes that staff has proposed in our 18-page document? Anyone up north? Any committee members up north? Any committee members down south? Ms. Ellis?
On page 18, the table, I don't the changes to the system, we can change that table also.
We will do that.
Mr. Mazzoni?
Mike Mazzoni for the record. Mr. Hager, when may we see a copy of any agreements that navigators, assisters, or producers will have to sign with the exchange in order to be a qualified, I hate to use the term salesperson, but producer, navigator, or assistant for the exchange?
When you say we, do you mean the committee for review, or do you mean as a producer perhaps participating in this?
All of the above.
We had not envisioned providing the agreement back to the committee. The agreement would have would follow the policies of the committee and the board that had been approved in this document and other documents, and the ACA itself. We're not sure exactly when we'll be able to provide that agreement to the public or to the producers or navigators. I hope that we'll be able to provide that late spring. We actually, I should add, we intend to have an exchange summit at some point in the future that will bring together the various stakeholders that need to understand how to enroll people and what their options are. Insurance companies, producers, navigator entities, boards and committee members, whoever else might want to attend. And we're looking at that one being probably the late spring as well, probably as we head into the new fiscal year.
It'll have to be for the grant process as well.
And it'll probably have to be part of the grant process. Excuse me. Go ahead.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? So is there a motion from the committee to accept the changes in the 18-page navigator, enrollment assister, and producers document that Mr. Hager has just reviewed? Motion. We have a motion from Ms. Parati-Boothman. Is there a second? Mr. Downey seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, everybody. That's incredible. So with that, that's closing agenda item 5. Agenda item 6. Mr. Hager. I have 6.
Discussion and possible action regarding dates, times, and agenda items for future meetings. Expect to have a committee meeting probably in early February, and that will provide. We'll come back and provide a comprehensive report that includes this item, includes probably bits and pieces from our marketing and outreach, the discussions that we have with them, potentially some other things, and then we'll have the Consumer Assistance Evaluation Monitoring Program, hopefully at that point, potentially a workshop for appeals regulations for the board's discussion in both March and April. Not sure exactly when that February meeting will be. At this point, it's a little further ahead than we're worried about right now, but we'll let you know as soon as we send out the request, the meeting request, and we'll get that back to you.
Thank comment. Mr. Hager, has this committee met more than any other committee?
I think so.
Yeah. So Mr. Mazzoni was saying, "You mean we're not meeting until February?" So I just.
What do I do with my life?
So I know we're still in public comment, and I know we have adjournment, but I just want to say that I think everyone here has been working so hard and so diligently and taking this so seriously, and I just appreciate it so much and know all the time and effort that everyone has put into it, staff included and the committee members, and it's just been really great, and I feel like I have the best committee of all. Don't tell the board that. I wanted to just publicly thank everyone and wish everyone a happy holiday, since we won't be meeting as a committee in December. To have a great holiday and a great New Year. And with that, we could open up to public comment. Anybody up in the north?
None here.
Anybody on the telephone? And I think we have one public comment here in Las Vegas, and I think just join us at the table. Sit right here.
Knocking over.
Very cool.
For the record, this is Barry Gold with Nevada. After having talked to a lot of my colleagues in other states of AARP offices, it's become apparent that the state of Nevada is really far ahead of the curve in terms of establishment of a state-based exchange. As we read in the newspaper about a lot of states that all of a sudden are changing their mind and are deciding not to have a state-based exchange. Nevada has an opportunity to really be a model for the rest of the country on how state exchanges are operated. I'd like to commend the members of this committee and of the board for doing the job they're doing, and how Nevada can finally lead the way in getting something done and getting to the top of the list.
Thank you.
Mr. Gold, could you please provide, it would be appreciated if you could provide a written comment to that effect at the December 13th board meeting.
I would be glad to do that if I can make that one.
We'll take it in writing. We'll take a letter.
All right, we don't have any other public comment here, so with that, the meeting's adjourned, and thank you again, everyone, and happy holidays.